Hello and welcome to the latest Liverpool.com podcast with myself, Keifer, MacDonald and Matt Addison. Matt, fresh from Southampton. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Yeah, feeling a little bit tired. I only just walked through the door and straight onto a podcast, but Liverpool won, so it's all good.
No better way to do it. Before we get into Liverpool 2, Southampton 1, shout out to our sponsors NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn/bloodred.com. Our link will give you 4 months. It'll give you an extra 4 months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with no 30-day money-back guarantee. The link can be found in the podcast episode description box. Matt will get straight into it even. Give me your thoughts on last night, kind of your initial reaction. It was one of those games where you just kind of have to tick it off on the fixture list, especially being so deep in the competition already. I mean, Slot made lots of changes, but Liverpool came out on top again, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've got used to, isn't it, really, in this competition? Not necessarily under Arne Slot, but I suppose that the early signs are that he will make wholesale changes in this competition as well. But obviously in the last few years, we've got used to Liverpool making changes and still being able to find a way of winning. And to be honest, I always thought that was likely yesterday. When you see the team, it's a little bit makeshift, but I think, as we'll probably talk about, Wataru Endo was a centre-back, but he wasn't really spending much of the game in that position. He was mainly in midfield, and they kind of just left Jarell Quansah on his own. When you've got Cody Gakpo there, you've got Harvey Elliott there, you've got enough quality in the final third, I think, to look at a makeshift Liverpool team and think that it was still comfortably better than what Southampton were able to put out. So yeah, I'm not surprised that Liverpool went through. They could have made it even easier had Southampton not scored the goal in the way that they did, a really good goal. Apart from that, they were pretty much in control of things. So yeah, it was a positive, I think, to get into a semi-final. There was no real period where Liverpool should have been worried in that game, and to make that many changes, you're never quite sure how it's going to work, or the new relationships that there's going to be, Endo and Quansah, or Endo to Joe Gomez at left back, or whatever it might be. You're never quite sure how that's going to look, but yeah, there was always enough experience there on the pitch for Liverpool to get the job done, and obviously the 2 goals in the first half ultimately ended up being enough to do that.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can kind of split the team in half, really, can't you? I mean, the forward 4 players, I think everyone kind of predicted before the game, Elliott would come back in for his first start of the season. He's not had a lot of minutes, obviously been out injured for quite a while. Nunez, he's maybe been relegated to the role of cup striker now that Jota's back fit. McAllister obviously hasn't played too much in recent weeks due to various suspensions, and obviously Gakpo, kind of slots in on the left. But obviously then you're looking at the midfield, and then the defence was obviously a big talking point before that. In the end, obviously, goes with Alexander-Arnold, Quansah, Endo, Gomez, and then in front of those, it's obviously Tyler Morton and Trey Naoni. What did you kind of make of that kind of, the defence and the midfield? More so the defence, because I think throwing Endo in there, I know you touch on saying that you didn't spend too much time as centre-half, but I think that caught a lot of people out by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I thought when he mentioned in the pre-match press conference that he was going to do something creative. I think you're looking at it and thinking, well, there's not that many options. Endo has played there before. I can't say I've ever seen him play there myself, but, has done that when he was in Germany. It sort of seems the most obvious of the least obvious things that you could have done, really. There was, obviously Tyler Morton went into the right back in the second half, and, there's 1 or 2 things that you maybe could have done, but as soon as Arne Slot said that, my immediate thought really was that it would be Endo. I thought he might play the role in a more kind of conventional, just sort of sitting there alongside Quansah, but he was very much back and forward whenever Liverpool had the ball, which was the vast majority of the game. He was pretty much just in his normal position, and that kind of made sense, I think, for a game like that where Southampton didn't have a great deal to offer. A couple of the players who caused Liverpool problems in the past were on the bench. Onuachu in particular caused Liverpool all sorts of problems, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Came off the bench, but didn't really do a great deal. I think if it had been the Southampton of 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe Liverpool could have had a few more problems. But yeah, the defence worked itself out. Obviously, Gomez and Trent, the plan was always to have 45 minutes of them. I think it's a huge boost to have Kostas Tsimikas back. I think there's a few questions about Andy Robertson. To have obviously him back and Tsimikas as well for the weekend, I think will help in terms of just adding some numbers in those positions. And yeah, it's all positive, really. I think obviously winning was big, but I think more than that, really, that the minutes that you can put into the legs of a few of these players, I think was hugely important. And to be able to win and look solid, even with all those defensive changes, it was a little bit makeshift, but if you'd have looked at those two teams, I don't think there was any doubt really which one was going to win that game.
Absolutely. I mean, I was really impressed with how, Endo not just kind of, led by example, but also with the likes of Quansah there. He's a player who's looked quite short of confidence, and especially in recent weeks. It's been a tough season for him, especially how kind of well he started 2024. He's not really had too much action on the slot. And then you look at the two lads in front of him in midfield. One Endo was stepping in there, Morton and Maione. Not a great deal of first team experience between them. But I thought, Endo really kind of led by example, winning his duels, making sure they knew where they needed to be. And I think that just helped Liverpool tick over it. And I don't think we really noticed the changes too much. I mean, it wasn't a great game. It wasn't a great spectacle. But in terms of, as you say, ticking fixtures off, it was one that I think Endo was really pivotal to doing. But just on the midfield, Trey Naoni, he's a player that me and you have watched quite a lot in the academy over the last 18 months since he moved to the club. I mean, what did you make of him? Because I was really impressed with how eager he was to get on the ball quite early, and he was kind of Liverpool's outball in that midfield. A lot of the first teamers, even Gomez was looking toward him, getting him on the ball, and I don't know if that was just to settle his nerves or the fact that he was just really confident, looking to make a mark. I mean, he's had a few first team appearances, but to be thrown in for your first start, 17 in a League Cup quarter final. I mean, it takes some doing that, doesn't it, to kind of to step up and be noticed.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to do it at Anfield, but then quite a different thing to do it away from home against a team like Southampton, where it can be a little bit lively. I think, obviously, Russell Martin being sacked, there was a decent atmosphere in the stadium for the first half an hour or so, and I thought that's actually when he played his best football. I thought Naoni tired quite a lot really in the second half and really looked a little bit jaded and just needed to come off probably a little bit earlier than what he did. Obviously, he was trusted to be on there and trusted to just do enough to get through and help Liverpool across the line. But yeah, first half, I thought he was excellent. I thought he didn't look out of place, for the first half an hour in particular, but, the majority of the first half, you'd never ever have known that he was such an inexperienced player. As you say, his first start for Liverpool, in there alongside, a couple of more experienced players. I thought Tyler Morton was very good. Obviously, Alexis McAllister in there as well. It's obviously going to help if you're, a 17-year-old coming in to be able to play alongside, players like that. McAllister in particular, I thought really helped him through the game and sort of, trusted him, but didn't give him the ball in any silly situations where he had a couple of players around him or anything like that. But yeah, we've seen plenty of times in Kirby just how comfortable he is on the ball. He's very intelligent, very technically gifted. I think he's a big talent, and it's a good sign, I think. I think we always assumed that it would be the case that Liverpool found a Jurgen Klopp replacement that was going to go down this path and use these players, but it wasn't a given. I don't think that, someone like Naoni could be thrown in. Maybe you could have had him on the bench and brought him on in the second half. But yeah, he showed he was ready. He showed he was old enough and mature enough to go into a game like that. I'd be surprised if we, saw him in the semi-final at all. But, maybe that game against Accrington Stanley, I think that's probably one that he's got a big red circle around, because he is such a talent. Liverpool are going to be really careful with him. He's obviously trained a lot with the first team, not played a huge amount of first team minutes, but has been sort of in the bigger youth games, the youth league. He's been the captain this season and has played quite a big role in that. Obviously been on the bench for the first team as well in the Champions League when they've needed, extra numbers. So he's definitely not being overplayed. Liverpool are very, very careful in terms of nurturing him, but I think that's, a really good sign that you can throw him into a game like that. And, he was at least as good as any of the Southampton midfielders. And if you're 17 and already look like Premier League ready and, you could be thrown into a bigger game, I think that's definitely a positive sign.
Absolutely. And we'll get on to the opening goal then. Darwin Núñez, I think I said it on last week's podcast. It's not a Liverpool.com podcast or any Liverpool podcast for that matter. If Darwin Núñez isn't heavily mentioned, he gets the goal, Matt. I mean, it was a really nice piece of play from Trent Alexander-Arnold. He goes to that first, he goes to that ball in behind, and it's kind of cut out by Bednarek, but it almost kind of helps Núñez's run, doesn't it? It takes the pace off it a bit, gives him a bit of time, and the goalkeeper again, like he was a few weeks ago, caught him in no man's land. And to be fair, I was really impressed with Núñez because, how many times have we seen him maybe blast it over the bar or hit it wide, whatever. He kind of took this touch and, he obviously had far more time. But I think during Núñez's time at Liverpool, the one thing I've learned is that when he's got time, he struggles. But yesterday, he really kept his head down and passed the ball into the back of the net, really, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it was a classic example of when a striker has too much time to think about something, and the one player you don't want to have too much time is Darwin Núñez. So I was glad to see that he put the ball in the back of the net. It shouldn't be something that we praise him for, really, because any player on the pitch, and I include Quillian Kelleher in that, should have been able to score that chance. That there was a gaping goal that the Southampton goalkeeper was just completely in no man's land, like you say. He had to score that, but obviously did. And I thought he put in the hard yards, really. He wasn't hugely involved throughout the game, but he did do, quite a lot of running. You mentioned the pass there from Trent as well. There was, I can't underestimate how windy and how horrible it was, particularly in that first half. It really was not the conditions to be, trying balls like that. But obviously, a well-timed run, a good pass from Trent as well in the circumstances. So it was a nice goal. It was one that he had to score, and hopefully that can mean he can kick on and gain some confidence. But it's tricky to know really with him, because I think for one, we've never really seen that in the past, where he gets one and you think, right, he's in the groove now and he's going to kick on. There was no difference really in his performance before the goal and after the goal. It seemed pretty straight in terms of that. But also, I'd be surprised if he was in the starting 11 at the weekend. And you're kind of looking now, Diogo Jota's back. Obviously, Cody Gakpo's in good form. There's plenty of other options there. So it's, again, obviously about consistency of finishing, as we said last week, but also where does he get those minutes and does he get a bit of a run in the side? Obviously, he's had that for the last few weeks and not taken a chance. He's now got more competition, but he has taken the chance. So it's come probably the wrong way around for him, I think. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I think it's a big few months ahead, definitely, for Darwin Núñez, but it's never a bad thing when you score.
No, absolutely. I mean, he doesn't do things in the simple way, is that's one thing I've also learned about Darwin Núñez. You talk there about, probably not putting him in the starting lineup for Sunday's game at Spurs. Is there a risk, obviously, I know Jota came back again and kind of built on his weekend performance, 25 minutes in the bank. Is there a risk with throwing Jota straight in? I imagine that would be the alternative you'd be looking at. I mean, Jota, I always feel now he's probably got to be considered a bit of a luxury player for Liverpool. You can't really plan a full season with him. You just kind of got to take what you can get.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think, looking ahead to the weekend, I'd like to see Cody Gakpo stay in the team. I think he's in a really good run of form at the moment. I think he's scored and assisted a fair bit in the last sort of 10 games or so. He's probably one of the informed attackers, really, not just for Liverpool, but across the Premier League in terms of those numbers. So I'd like to see him stay in. Obviously, Luis Diaz has got a point to prove against Tottenham after what happened last season to him. Hopefully he can get a goal that he should have got then. So I think possibly for the weekend, I'd be looking more at maybe a Salah, Diaz and Gakpo front three, and then Jota as an impact sub. But obviously, to have Diogo Jota there, obviously wasn't able to start midweek against Southampton because he had obviously another little injury in the build-up between the previous match and the next one. So yeah, I wouldn't be averse to throwing him straight in at the weekend, but I think if it was me, I'd probably use him as an impact substitute, because I think he's just as influential sometimes when he comes off the bench. I thought when he came off the bench against Fulham last weekend, he looked really good and really sharp and was able to do a few of the things that we don't always see from him in terms of that link-up play. And he was almost playing as a number 10, really, which typically you think of him just doing one thing, which is scoring goals and being a bit of a poacher, but he did show the other side of his game as well. So I think you can go one of two ways, really, but I think it will either be Diaz through the middle or Jota, and that kind of sums up what we've said, really, about Darwin Núñez. It would be a major surprise, I think, to me if Darwin Núñez was the starting player on Sunday.
And Salah obviously will be going into that game, fresh. He had the night off. I'm sure he was watching it on Sky Sports. Harvey Elliott back in action. I mean, that's huge for Liverpool, isn't it? Because Salah has played near enough every single game so far this season. There isn't really a like-for-like replacement. And I don't think Elliott's position is on the right wing, but, in games like last night, he showed that his kind of quality shines through. We saw him at the back end of last season in that more midfield role. And, I think that's where a lot of people think he'll play on the slot in that number 10 role, probably compete with Szoboszlai. But the fact that Liverpool now have him, they have Chiesa, I mean, that's just only going to, ensure that Salah can continue the form that he's on. And, Elliott did his chances of getting a start more regularly, if he is to break kind of into that slot 11, no harm, did he?
No, I thought he was excellent. I thought he was Liverpool's best player, really, Harvey Elliott, across the course of the game. I thought it was interesting that Arne Slot mentioned in his post-match press conference that he moved Elliott into midfield partly because he wasn't really getting many touches. I think he said he was getting bored on the right wing, which I wasn't quite convinced that was true, to be honest. I thought he was quite involved in that first half. He did seem to have lots of touches and be involved. Obviously, it's easier to do that from a central position. But yeah, to have him and Federico Chiesa, I don't know how close either of those two players are really to being able to start, particularly on that right-hand side. You'd be surprised to see Elliott in a league or a Champions League game, but to have that option, I think is definitely a good thing if Liverpool are cruising in a couple of games, which they haven't necessarily done for the last few weeks, but you'd think there's maybe one or two on the horizon. Leicester, for example, if Liverpool can get 2 or 3 goals up by the hour mark, maybe then you can bring on, a Chiesa and give Mohamed Salah the half hour off that might make a bit of a difference, further down the line, whether that's, a few days later between Leicester and West Ham, or, whether that's 2 or 3 months later or whatever it might be before the end of the season. So, yeah, to have those options is huge, really. I thought Federico Chiesa looked quite raw and needed quite a lot more time, but again, that's no surprise. Slot was asked about him as well, obviously, in his post-match press conference, and essentially said, he's been out for 5 or 6 months. He's not had a pre-season. They've slowly been building him up. So yes, he was up and down, but that's exactly what you'd expect, really. So yeah, there's still more work, I think, for both of them to do. Obviously, Harvey Elliott is a lot closer to his peak fitness and peak condition than Chiesa is. And obviously that will help, I think, in terms of, in the same way that there's an alternative to Salah, there's an alternative now to Curtis Jones, or maybe you can bring Curtis Jones and play him deeper. Obviously, Dominic Szoboszlai's played a lot of football this season as well, so it's always good to have those options. And I know, like you, a big fan of Harvey Elliott. I think he's hugely influential, and I think against some of the lesser teams and the teams at the bottom half that are going to sit back and defend. I always look back at the Nottingham Forest game, and it's easy to say because Liverpool lost, but maybe had he been there, maybe the result could have been different than that one. And maybe that will be the case, in the second half of this season as well.
Absolutely. I mean, just want to go back to Chiesa a bit, because I kind of saw a lot of discourse on Twitter last night. 50% saying that they were happy with what they saw, step in the right direction, all that kind of thing. A lad who's come to a new league, as you say, it would be different if the game was at Anfield and Liverpool a bit more on top. But especially in the second half when he was playing and Southampton kind of grew in confidence with the goal, it became more of a battle. And I think there was a few times where he received the ball out wide, and instead of maybe Liverpool fans might want someone to go out the full back and whatnot and take him on. I think there's a few times where he passed it inside, which is completely understandable because he's still trying to build his body back up. But I mean, were you impressed with what you saw? I mean, you said that he had some moments, but I mean, at the end of the day, he could have had a goal and an assist, really. I mean, there was that one at the end, which I thought was, it was, I think, about 86, 87 minutes where he cuts inside on his left foot, and that was cleared off the line. I think that's kind of the Chiesa that Liverpool fans are waiting to see. It's kind of the Chiesa that we all saw at the Euros a few years ago. And even, I mean, the one a few minutes before that where he tried to pass it to kind of Elliott and Núñez, I think that was someone who looked a bit like they hadn't played football for 6 or 7 months, because he was kind of caught in two minds, and in the end he just made the completely wrong decision. But no, I would say I was impressed with him. I mean, what are kind of the next steps for him in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because unless Liverpool are cruising in a Premier League game, I think what last night told me was that he's not ready to start, certainly in a bigger game than that. He's not ready to make a real difference off the bench when you've obviously got those 6 forwards if Liverpool needed a goal at the weekend, and they've got Diogo Jota and Darwin Núñez on the bench alongside Chiesa. It's probably almost a question of, is Chiesa going to make the bench, let alone is he going to be the one to come off? I think he is very much 6th out of the 6 senior forwards at the moment for Liverpool, with all of them fit. He's a long way off being, in the reckoning, I think, to come in for a game like a Tottenham, maybe a throw in for a Leicester or something like that. But I think you're probably looking at the Accrington Stanley game in the FA Cup. Maybe that's one way you can throw him in. And again, it's not going to be hugely instructive in terms of what his level is. If he plays well, people will say, well, it's an Anfield game against a League 2 team. Of course, that is going to show up and show that he's got quality. But I think that's probably the next step for him, really, is obviously came off the bench in last night's game. Maybe he starts that one. Maybe you then start to see him a couple more times off the bench. But it's just a case of going slowly, really, with him. There's been players in the past who've had patchy injury records, and Liverpool have tried to maybe throw them in too much or go too hard too soon with them. Naby Keita is the obvious example, really, because he came in and was kind of the saviour for this midfield that didn't really need saving, and it was kind of this idea that he was going to come in and completely transform things. obviously that didn't happen, but Liverpool don't need that to happen with, Federico Chiesa. They've got the best right winger in the world in Mohamed Salah. They've got, other players who can slot in and play in those positions. If it takes another 6 months and then he has a pre-season and goes again next season, obviously that's not ideal. That's not what Liverpool would have wanted. But that's kind of the point really, is that they bought him precisely because it didn't really matter what happened in the short term. This is very much a longer term project, and if they need to be patient, then it's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you summed up there perfectly. I think there's a lot of people who are so desperate to get him fit for kind of the here and now, but at the end of the day, he's a player who signed a 4-year contract and he was signed for a minimal fee. If he doesn't play, as you say, a great deal this season, Liverpool have already coached about him for the first 5 and 6 months, whatever. They can't miss what they never had kind of thing. So I think, if you can kind of build him up, I think everyone's looking at that pre-season next year already and probably thinking that's when you're probably going to see the real Chiesa, or at least get a fair reflection of what you've paid for. But yeah, at the minute, I mean, even if he just takes 20 minutes off Salah's game time here and there, because I think that, there's a danger of becoming a bit of an over-reliance on Salah. If you look at his, especially over the last, maybe earlier this year and then in 2022, Salah started like a house on fire the first 3 or 4 months of the season. Then he went to AFCON. I know there's no AFCON this year, but it shows that his body, he is human after all, as good as his body looks, and that kind of, I think that happened earlier this year. He was kind of rushed back a bit too soon. He came back at Brentford, scored a really nice goal and then kind of broke down again. And when he came back, he was never really the same. And I kind of remember that happening in 2022. He scored all those goals in the first half of the season and then kind of tailed off. So I think there's just especially as Salah gets older, I think there's just a real cautious approach that needs to be taken. And if you can just, if you're 2-0 up against, Bournemouth at home, take him off, even if it's on 60, 70, whatever, because of, over a 38 game, 48 game season, whatever, that's all going to add up, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing I'd add really in terms of Chiesa is that, let's just imagine for a second that he was absolutely flying at the moment. He was 100% fit. He wouldn't be starting that many matches anyway, because even, 100% of Federico Chiesa isn't as good as what Mohamed Salah is showing right now. So it was always going to be the case that he was, a backup option, someone to come in and rotate a little bit. He might have to do a little bit through the middle, but like we've discussed, they've got other options who can do that as well. So yeah, it's just not a big deal at this moment in time. If by the end of, the summer next season, we're still having these conversations, then, fine, that's a different conversation for us to have. But, at this moment in time, the money he cost, the kind of position that he was in, the fact that it was very much, opportunistic, that was the word, wasn't it? Yeah, it is what it is. If Liverpool see more of him, then great. But if they don't, they're in a fantastic position, and he's not really contributed anything so far this season. So if you're top of the Champions League and the Premier League, and you've got him to add, it's not a bad position to be in.
Absolutely. And just to finish off, speaking about last night's game then, Matt, who are your kind of, you had to pick the biggest winner from the game, who would it be? I mean, is it Endo's maybe not a great deal of a look in this season and he comes in with a man of the match performance, or is it, Trey Naoni, or is it Harvey Elliott? I mean, if you had to pick one person, I mean, obviously, of course, it can be any of those who featured, but who would you pick?
Yeah, we do a winners and losers section of our player ratings on Liverpool.com, and I really struggle to think of anyone who came out of that as a loser. I think, everybody came through it and either benefited from just being on the pitch. In the case of Endo, worked out he's done 92% of his minutes this season have come in the Carabao Cup. So I think that kind of shows where he is in the pecking order. I think he'll, as much as he wants to play midfield, probably will just be happy to see the grass at all, and just to be involved was a huge thing for him. So he was obviously a big winner, but I think I'd struggle to look beyond Harvey Elliott, I think, in terms of he's the one that you look at in that team. Obviously, Cody Gakpo's there as well, but I'd say he's already in the frame, really, in terms of being the first choice 11 for Arne Slot. Harvey Elliott has been out for a substantial period of time. It's his first start of the season. He scores, he plays well, he plays the full 90 minutes, which I think shows he's in a position physically to be able to do that now. It shows that he's 100% back, really. They wouldn't have done that if there was any kind of risk or anything that was being taken there. So I think he was probably the biggest winner, really. He's still got an uphill battle to get ahead of what Dominic Szoboszlai can do in the bigger games in terms of the physical stuff. Harvey Elliott is never going to be able to run as fast and as hard and as strong and have those physical attributes, but as we said before, he's got maybe more guile and more creativity for certain moments. there might be opportunities for him more off the bench in some of the bigger games, but whatever it is, he can definitely play a big role over the next few weeks. And yeah, I think Arne Slot, watching on from the press box, would have been very pleased to see him play as well as he did for such a consistent period of time. So I think there was definitely a number of winners. Simicats coming back was great. Kelleher, almost similar to Endo, really, and just being on the pitch. Tyler Morton as well was very good in midfield. Slightly less good as you'd expect at fullback. But yeah, Harvey Elliott, I think the big winner, and Liverpool could be the big winner of that, I think, over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. And just looking ahead to the Thursday night draw then, Arsenal, Liverpool and Newcastle to be joined by United or Tottenham, who play tonight. Who would you want in the semi-final? And do Liverpool go full throttle now for this League Cup? I mean, there was a bit of talk earlier this week, I think it was on the Overlap, where Carragher was basically saying, if he could basically sit down with Slot, he'd tell him to kind of jib off the cups, just go for the Premier League and the Champions League in such a strong position. But I always feel with the League Cup, it's unlike the FA Cup, it doesn't disrupt your schedule, because by the time you kind of get into the rhythm, you're already in a semi-final, and then it's like, well, you might as well go and win it, because the chance and kind of the feel-good factor of winning a trophy in late February, early March, as we saw last season, what it can kind of do. I mean, I know Liverpool didn't win the Premier League last season, but I think their Premier League title challenge was probably extended by the feel-good factor that was created off the back of the League Cup. So where do you kind of stand with that? Because I think as fans, I think loads of people obviously, love the day out of Wembley and stuff, but, sometimes we've seen bigger clubs. I mean, someone like Arsenal, for instance, who haven't won they've won one trophy under Arteta in 4 years, whatever. They should really be going for a League Cup, but it seems that they're kind of like Premier League or Champions League or bust. So where do you see Liverpool sitting with that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's not a bad place to start, really. I think it's probably much more important for Arsenal. You could put Newcastle into that as well. Obviously, with their Saudi takeover, one of the big things for them was that they want to go and win a trophy. It's an opportunity for them to do that. Ange Postecoglou has put himself under pressure and says he wins things in his second season. So let's see if that happens. And obviously, Ruben Amorim and Manchester United, it'd be a way to save their season, really, in terms of where they are in the Premier League. So you can make the argument, really, that it's more important for all of the other teams. But why shouldn't Liverpool go for it? I think in the semi-final, if you've got to that point, you might as well. I take the point, really, that a few people have made about the schedule and having the 2 extra games, but Liverpool have got a big enough squad that you can make a few changes. You can maybe change 3 or 4 players, and it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. I'd be surprised if we saw, Trey Naoni and Tyler Morton and a couple of those players in those matches. But I mentioned the Accrington game before. Obviously, that comes, I think, 3 or 4 days before the first leg in this competition. So, okay, yeah, you might make a few changes for the cup competitions, but when they're back-to-back and they're so close, you're not going to play the kids at the weekend and then play the kids again, because then it's too much of a gap for the senior players. So it almost makes more sense, I think, to go for it, particularly in the first leg. Okay, then you sort of reassess and see if it's close, or if you need to go strong in the second leg, maybe that is an extra game to throw in there. But in terms of the schedule and the fixture list, the first game, because of when it falls, between an FA Cup game and then a Premier League game the following weekend, I almost don't see it as an extra game. I see the extra game as the Accrington one, if that makes sense, and then you go strong in this one. So, yeah, the feel-good factor is important. The fact that you can get minutes in players' legs is important, but it's also a semi-final. If you're a couple of games away from Wembley, you might as well go for it. I think whoever Liverpool get, by the time some people listen to this, they may well know who Liverpool have drawn in that competition, but whoever it is, I think it'll be, a couple of good games and something to relish. There's not always been that. It was Fulham, wasn't it, last season in the semi-final. There's, a semi-final. There's a level of glamour to that, but I think whoever it is that Liverpool get this time, it'll feel like a bigger occasion as well. So yeah, listen, they're there. They've not really had to break much sweat to get there. They might as well just make the most of it, I think, at this point.
Absolutely. And then on Sunday, Liverpool return to Premier League action. And they're currently, Chelsea could go, Chelsea are 2 points behind them at the minute, and Chelsea could go top. Obviously, they play Everton in Sunday's early kickoff. I mean, how do you see that game of Tottenham going? Because, I mean, we saw the game there last season, which is absolutely mental for so many reasons. Liverpool finished the game with 9 men, have a goal disallowed, that should have stood. Not that anyone needed reminding of that, but Tottenham feel so Jekyll and Hyde at the minute. It feels like quietly there's a bit of pressure building up Postecoglou. He's kind of come out swinging. He's had a bit of back and forth with a few supporters the other week. Obviously, they had that really good win against Manchester City, but since then it's been 1 win in 6. A lot of draws in there. They beat Southampton obviously 5-0 at the weekend. Russell Martin's last game in charge. It feels like with Tottenham, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, they could be the best team in the world one day, and then they could lose to Wolves or the worst team in the Premier League. So, I mean, it is a really I don't really like going there. I think it's a bit of a banana skin game for Liverpool, really.
Yeah, I mean, when they're good, they're good, and when they're bad. And I think they will play in a way that should give Liverpool a chance. I always say with these games, and pretty much any game that Liverpool play, if Liverpool play well, they win, because they are better than Tottenham. They are more consistent. They've got more consistent goal scorers, and you'd like to think with the way that Tottenham throw players forward, no matter what, that the way that they set up in terms of their system, particularly at home, I think they've shown a tendency to take risks and gambles, and it pays off sometimes, and it doesn't at other times. I think this is one of the times where if you do leave gaps for Luis Diaz, Mohamed Salah, Diogo Jota, whoever it might be, the running of Dominic Szoboszlai against that Tottenham midfield, you think would suit Liverpool. It just basically has to not turn into the kind of game that it was last season, where pretty much everything went wrong for Liverpool. I think if it's 11v11 and there's no VAR errors and there's no sort of nonsense that goes on around it, I think Liverpool will be able to show that they are comfortably the better team out of the two. So I think it would not surprise me if Liverpool went there and won well, but it would be, as you say, when it looks like a bit of a banana skin, and Tottenham have beaten Manchester City as well as they have. They've had a few good results this season. It would be, I think, a little bit of a statement for Liverpool to go there and perform well and put down a marker. But that is at the same time almost what I'm expecting. Really, I think it's a game that should suit Liverpool, but I think it's really important because you mentioned Chelsea. I'm expecting that they will, be able to beat Everton and go ahead this weekend, though it's not going to be easy for them, of course. And I'm still not 100% convinced by Chelsea, but obviously even with a game in hand, or 2 games in hand as it'll be by the time Liverpool kick off at Tottenham, it would just be nice really to go back above them and just sort of put that little bit of distance really between the two teams again. I think that could be important in the Premier League title race.
Absolutely. And how do you kind of look at the opportunity for Chelsea to go top? I mean, 2 weeks ago after the Man City game, Liverpool were 9 points clear. I know it was a bit of a false kind of lead at the minute because Liverpool obviously have that Merseyside derby as their game in hand. Well, it feels very quickly like that lead, with a few draws in there. Obviously, the draw to Newcastle, the draw to Fulham. It all of a sudden feels like Liverpool's advantage has kind of gone, and all of a sudden Chelsea now can go top for the first time in a while, maybe for the first time this season, in fact. But psychologically, do you think that have any impact on kind of Liverpool and Slot, or do you think they're very much taking it one game at a time?
I think for Liverpool, it's always been the same all along. I mean, it's easy to sort of say it, and we've heard Arne Slot say it many times that he's not really thinking about that, and he's not thinking about the lead, and he's taking one game at a time. And it's easy to brush that off as just sort of him coming up with cliche lines and that kind of what he's got to say. He's never going to say anything different. But I do think there is, an element of truth in that. There's never been a huge amount of difference between the teams. The difference really is that Liverpool beat Chelsea when they played each other. If that had been, say at Stamford Bridge and Chelsea had have come out on top, it would have been the other way round in terms of the other results being very, very similar. So, yeah, it's tricky, I think, to assess where Chelsea are up to. They've obviously got the huge advantage of essentially not playing in Europe because they play a completely different team in that competition. I think a lot of their hopes stem from Cole Palmer, and if anything was to happen to him in terms of an injury before the end of the season, that could change things. But yeah, it's hard really. It's hard not to put them in the title conversation, but then Enzo Maresca at every opportunity says they're definitely not part of it. I think he will at some point, if they do go top, he is going to have to accept that is something they're going to have to think about and deal with in the second half of the season. But I think I'm probably not the only one that's not really fully convinced on Chelsea yet. But the longer it goes and the longer they are in there, the pressure changes, the emphasis will shift, and it won't just be a case of people looking at Chelsea and going, oh, they're on quite a good run and they're doing well. If they do go top, even though Liverpool will have 2 games in hand, I think it'll just change the narrative really. When you take that lead, no matter the circumstances, I think that probably puts a little bit more pressure onto them. So it will then be obviously up to them to be able to deal with that, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's it's not going to be an easy game, I don't think, against Everton, particularly with obviously the takeover going through. There should be something of a feel-good factor there for them as well. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But I'm not fully convinced on Chelsea, but it doesn't really matter if Liverpool do their own job.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how Chelsea negotiate that. Someone told me this morning that I think they've won one of the last 6 at Goodison. I'm not sure if that is true, but someone on the FO Sports desk told me so. Don't shoot the messenger. But yeah, certainly be interesting to see how Chelsea kind of deal with that shift of mindset if they do go top, because as you say, it's a very young squad, but it's a very it's been an expensively assembled squad, so there is a lot of pressure there. The players are coming into their own a bit. Fernandes has done really well recently, Caicedo too, but there's only so long that a 200 million quid midfield pairing can go under the radar and be the kind of plucky underdog. So it will be interesting from a player's point of view, and certainly Maresca's as well. But Matt, if I have to ask you for a prediction for Sunday, not for Everton versus Chelsea, we'll leave that there, but for Tottenham versus Liverpool, what are you going to give me?
I think there will be goals. I think Liverpool will win.
Well, they can only be allowed to stand, though. That's
yeah. Well, maybe a 2-1 or a 3-1 to Liverpool. I do fancy Liverpool to go there and catch them on the counter a couple of times. I just think the way that Tottenham play, Postecoglou isn't going to change that. He didn't really change that last season, and it would have obviously been very different had Luis Diaz's goal stood. So, yeah, I'm going to go for a Liverpool win. I was asked on the radio last night, actually, will last season's result mean that Liverpool have more motivation to win? I'm not sure whether that will be the case, but I do think Liverpool will get over the line anyway. Maybe there'll be a little bit of extra motivation for Luis Diaz, but yeah, Joel Matip is no longer there, and it was obviously his sad moments at the end. So yeah, I think Liverpool will win. I'm reasonably confident, and at the very least, I think it should be a really good game with plenty of goals.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope Liverpool can keep their spot at the top of the Premier League. But that's all from us today. We'll be back next weekend to review obviously Tottenham and maybe preview the Leicester clash if it's before then. If not, it might be a few days after that, given the break between Christmas and the New Year. But Matt, thanks for joining me. Nice to see you back home, well and safe in Southampton. And thanks for listening, guys.